Let's see if this works. I've done I've started to work on doing scheduling for my live events rather than just go live. Create the little scheduling thing, and that's completely messed up my previous settings that I used to use on that, because it used to be it was set it and forget it. The same button would just broadcast all my channels, and now every time I create a new live event, I have to change it in the settings. So if I don't remember to do that, then it broadcasts somewhere else, and that's always annoying. So I have to make sure. This is, I think, only the second week of doing that. It says on YouTube we're live. Let's see. Yes, a bunch of people say we're live there. Let me check on Odysee, and then we can roll right into things. And on the note of weather-based pleasantries, it is kind of funny how in February it was 60 degrees here in New Hampshire, and that's probably the same as it was in Phoenix, kind of.
Yeah.
So competing with the frozen north and the desert are competing. Let me see where we're at for. I think we're live on Odysee as well. Yep. Yeah, a whole bunch of people. Diff in the house. Everything good. All right. Well, hey everyone. Welcome to another Dash podcast. A little bit impromptu on this one. Let me just roll the intro credits, and then we'll get into everything. So, happy Friday, everyone. I'm joined by the one and only Ryan Taylor, CEO of Dash Core Group. How's it going, man?
Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So, basically, there's been a little to-do and drama in the community in the last couple of days, and a lot of people have been, there's been a big torrent of questions, and so Ryan messaged me saying, "Hey, I like to clear the air. Can I use your platform?" I'm like, "Sure." So, we have way more questions than anyone could possibly get through, probably. But we'll go in terms of most important to, or most relevant to least relevant. And before we get started on all that, obviously, first off, if the sound is good, or if the sound is not good, or you have trouble hearing someone, please indicate that in the live chat. Also, please be aware of the live super chat, cointr.ee/the desert lakes. And if you want to throw a question in there, and add it to the pile, it's definitely there. And another thing I would like to preface this whole thing is with the entire reason, at least the two of us, but probably almost everyone in the live chat is even here and paying attention, is because we're all, personally pretty invested in seeing the Dash project succeed. And there's, kind of setting the tone of like we're on the same team thing before, we try to, get a little bit off-road, as it were. So, let me see. Everyone seems like they can hear pretty well. Let me just make sure no one's saying anything on Odysee. All right. So, the first basic thing, it seems like the boil-over point was that the Dash newsroom, run by Mark Mason, apparently has not been involved in press releases and the like from Dash Core Group for a while, and there have been basically allegations of explicit, I would say the term has been thrown as like blackballing, but basically that the newsroom was explicitly excluded from its work on the network by Dash Core Group. And there's two sides of this. One is Dash Core Group for business development things, basically business development not working with the newsroom, and the other is Dash Core Group telling the Dash Investment Foundation, do not work with this guy, we'll work with someone else. So those are the first two things, and there's been, the first one big thing. So basically, yeah, what before we get into more targeted kind of questions on this, what's going on from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to say, well, Mark is not here.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone viewing this, do not view this as the entirety of the story. This is certainly my half. There's been plenty of the
Mm-hmm.
other half that's been going around, and so I caution people to get both sides of the story, not just mine. If you haven't seen the other allegations and things that are going on, I think you should
Mm-hmm.
assess what both sides are saying. I'll also preface all of this. I did prepare some
Mm-hmm.
written stuff that I'm going to read from. Obviously, you'll see that I'm reading. I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing that for a purpose. I wanted to make sure my facts were right when it came to quotes and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. I wanted to make sure that I was getting the original email on which the things occurred, that type of thing. I also want to be cautious not to reveal people's names that don't want to be. So, let me preface it with all of that. And here's the reason I'm reading parts of this on things I knew I was going to be asked about. So, firstly, Mark Mason is very popular with the community. I believe that Mark can be valuable in the right context. I also believe he has many great qualities. He's likable, he's engaging, he's clearly hardworking. However, his public persona and private behavior are at times significantly different from one another. And most of my interactions with Mark are positive ones. But unfortunately, the negative ones have been highly unprofessional, destructive towards relationships, and have bred mistrust with DCG staff members and many, though I'm clarifying here, not all of our partners. And I do have some examples of that occurring. I don't enjoy coming to the community to complain about another DFO or person
Mm-hmm.
that's attempting to serve the community. Infighting is never a good thing. I and the rest of the DCG have attempted to work with Mark in a collaborative fashion, and we continue to today, as I'll illustrate. And if the community continues to support Mark, we'll continue to involve him to the extent that we feel that we can. I have attempted to reconcile differences with Mark privately because I think that would serve the network. Those interactions haven't yielded much progress, and lately I haven't been pursuing them, frankly. Uh, and when the accusations became public and personal towards me, I do feel that I'm empowered to share my side of the story. Um, I'm going to attempt to be as factual as possible in all of my descriptions. I'm going to avoid any speculation unless I make clear that that's my own thoughts or interpretations of behavior I observed, and only for the purposes of adding to the insight I can provide to the community about my own decision making, the way that I was interpreting things, and why I made decisions that I did. I also plan to avoid using partner names or exact dates wherever possible because our partners don't want to be dragged into controversy either. And I also will be using gender neutral words to refer to people to minimize the possibility of people being identified that I haven't sought out their agreement to seek. So while it may sound like I'm not being precise, some of that is at least intentional. And I'll also take pains to specifically point out some of the things I'm not saying about the situations I'll describe. So, like most people, Mark is not a hero. He's not a villain. He's a human being. He has good qualities and some flaws. And that's how I view the situation here. My goal isn't to paint him as a villain. He's contributed much to the community. He remains popular. And in my opinion, it's simply that he's exhibiting behavior that makes it risky and challenging to utilize him to his full potential. We nonetheless continue to utilize Mark within a constrained capacity, and I'm happy to describe that too. I will say that it is true that in the wake of two specific incidences between Mark and two of the DIF's portfolio companies, I had a conversation with the Board of Supervisors in which I outlined the details of those incidences to the best of my knowledge and recommended that we avoid using Mark as the primary point of contact for PR and community communications for diff-related partnership announcements going forward. One of those portfolio companies proactively disengaged from Mark prior to that recommendation occurring. So during that conversation, I detailed a series of emails that Darren Tapp and I received from one of our partners that Mark had been interacting with in preparation for an announcement. I also shared a separate communication that one of my staff members received from another diff partner expressing concern about working with Mark. I made clear to the diff that there was no evidence of wrongdoing or outright unethical behavior. I am not saying that about Mark. The partners were discreet and professional, only making clear that they preferred not to work with Mark in the future. I will go into some detail on this later because I don't want to just unsubstantiated say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are some reasons to think that there were issues. Outside of the incidences that specifically affected the diff and their partners, I shared very little else about other incidences with DCG partners or staff members. My goal here was not to blackball Mark as it's being painted. My goal was to communicate the specific issues that were affecting the diff and make a recommendation about how to deal with those. I did share some of the details behind a couple of DCG related incidences that I thought could shed light on the type of behavior that might be turning off partners from working with Mark. And so I raised the issue because I'd seen enough of a pattern to conclude that Mark's involvement was likely to continue exposing risks to the diff's relationships. I had been hoping that the difficulty working with Mark was isolated to DCG, but the two incidences with the diff partners illustrated that the issue was more pervasive. It wasn't about me and it wasn't about DCG. This was a more pervasive issue. To be clear, I am not a diff supervisor. I do not have decision-making authority at the diff. Darren, who is a supervisor, and I both raised this issue together, and the supervisors, by majority vote, made the decision. And they continue to make decisions by majority vote going forward. I have no direct say over the matter, and I also have no ability to prohibit the diff from utilizing Mark in any capacity. The supervisors alone made the decision to discontinue involving Mark going forward based on the information presented. I don't even think, by the way, that Mark is fully aware of the incidences or that he was making people feel uncomfortable. And so this may come as a surprise to him. And
Why would that be? Why do you think he wouldn't be aware?
I don't think he has. This is my own personal opinion, to be clear. I don't think he knows when he has crossed the line from assertive into aggressive. And I've seen quite a few cases of it. And so I don't think this is boiling down to unethical behavior. I think it's just that he can cross the line at times into an area that starts to feel uncomfortable. So the first partner and the one that proactively disengaged from Mark prior to the conversation with the diff was in the summer of 2021. The CEO of a diff portfolio company reached out to Darren Tapp, not me. Initially, it was just Darren Tapp, inquiring very diplomatically what Mark's role was in relation to DCG and the Dash Investment Foundation, and whether or not we were requiring them to continue working with him. Darren involved me at that point just to help navigate a difficult situation. We weren't sure what was going on. How do we word this email? What do I say? And so Darren and I both made clear to the CEO that Mark was not a part of DCG or the DIF, and that the partner was not obligated to leverage him if they didn't see value. The CEO indicated that their own team was, quote, pro, and that they intended to leave it in their capable hands. I want to be clear, just as I was at the time when I raised this with the DIF, no specific reasons were given for turning away this free support. There was no allegation of wrongdoing, but it was clear that they were uncomfortable. And in parallel, we heard from other members of the partner team that Mark was consuming an inappropriate amount of their time and overstepping his role in support of PR, marketing to the community, this type of thing. In a separate incident, an employee of another partner of the DIF approached one of my team members at DCG expressing that Mark made them uncomfortable because he was aggressive and dominating the conversation. Often topics that were unrelated to their work, such as making product change suggestions, were completely outside of Mark's role or the purpose of the meeting. They also indicated that Mark was making disparaging comments about several members of DCG staff to them privately, and that this made them feel uncomfortable, especially because they liked working with some of the people that he was disparaging. And on at least 2 occasions, the meeting interruptions were so extensive on their weekly calls that my staff and the partner staff met separately after the official meetings were ended so that progress could resume on the project. At this point, I raised the issue to the CEO of the partner very diplomatically, and the CEO discussed the issue with the employee. And after that conversation, the CEO made the decision to continue working with Mark, but removed the employee from the situation, meaning the employee was no longer required to meet with him. I want to be clear once again, no allegation of wrongdoing here. I was not seeking to blackball Mark from this situation. I wanted the CEO to be aware that a situation was developing in which their employee was becoming extremely uncomfortable with the situation and that they might consider talking to them about it. The partner did not disengage from Mark, continued to work with him, just in a different capacity. I wasn't seeking to sever the relationship. I was seeking to help resolve issues with it. So those are the 2 incidences that I brought to the DIF and explained to them that this was part of a broader pattern that we were seeing. This was not isolated to these 2 incidences, and that I had grave concerns about the DIF in particular working with Mark, in part because the DIF doesn't have a marketing or business development or anything other function that is sitting in on these meetings. These are unsupervised. We didn't know what other issues might have been out there, and I perceive it to be a risk. And so the thing that I didn't share is the fallout that Mark has had with other DFOs, with DCG employees, and with our partners, several of them. And so it was part of a pattern for me, and we do our best to navigate it. But the falling outs have various reasons. So they include incidences of dishonesty, rudeness, unprofessional, and unethical behavior. In all cases, the relationship between the DCG employee and Mark was healthy and productive until one or more incidences eroded trust. I have gotten permission from many of them to use their names, and I will only use examples from people that are comfortable sharing it publicly. But Ernesto Contreras, our head of business development, said he initially had a productive relationship with Mark, participating on his podcasts and sharing information. He indicated to me that 3 specific interactions seriously eroded his trust in Mark. The first was in the summer of 2020. Omar brought Mark. Omar is one of our business development guys. or was. He recently left. He brought Mark to a meeting with a prospective partner in the trading space. And Mark was supposedly there in a PR service capacity to help with, how could we distribute this to our community or what have you. The company had 3 attendees, including 2 from senior management. And during the call, Mark accused the company of being a scam because he considered one of their information providers to be a scam. The 2 senior-most members abruptly dropped off the call early, and while the junior member of the partner team stayed on, the call was brought to a swift conclusion. And after the call ended, the junior member of the partners team made a direct call to Omar and asked, "What the F was that?" Omar did manage to salvage this relationship, but only after agreeing that Mark would have no involvement going forward. And he didn't have any involvement in the announcement or anything else when that partner did go live. In incident number 2 here, this was with Horizon. In August of last year, and over many months leading up to then, Mark was exposed to a project we were working on with Horizon. Over the course of those months, Mark was exposed to detailed information about the project, and he expressed support for it. Thought it was a good idea. Mark asked for additional information, which Omar provided via email in the form of a presentation that Horizon had shared with us. When the announcement was released, some members of the community were unhappy that we were partnering with another blockchain or that we were building something with another blockchain. Let me be clear on this. We want the cryptosphere building tools and integrations for Dash. Horizon approached us wanting to build a tool for the Dash community at their own expense. They didn't even need our permission to do it. All they were asking for is that we promote it to our community and they would promote it to theirs. Dash would get some new exposure to crypto interested people. But when the narrative turned and was, why are we building things that could be built on platform once platform is out, Mark suddenly became a critic of the partnership and provided no indication to the community that he'd been aware of the details for months. He also shared on the Dash community Discord the confidential information that we provided to him to help prepare the announcements. Specifically, he shared a screenshot of a presentation that includes the words, quote, "DCG shall be responsible for funding the development of the dashboards/apps." He highlighted those words in the screenshot and added, quote, "If DCG are using network funds to build on another blockchain, the network has every right to know."
Do you disagree with that statement?
I agree with that statement 100%. The problem I had with it is he knew the answer when he posted that. He had been in the meetings for months. He knew we hadn't spent anything. And yet he posed the question, and I cannot think of a reason why other than to sow uncertainty or doubt. And he did it by sharing information that was shared under non-disclosure. This puts DCG and Horizon in both very difficult positions. Why? Because in order to refute this not quite allegation, it was worded as a statement that almost anyone would agree with. Of course, the community has a right to know what we use the network's funds on. But in order for us to refute it and say no network funds were used, we have to release details of a contract that is under NDA. And why would our partner not want those details revealed? Well, if Horizon is giving us something and they're trying to negotiate the next deal, it may harm their ability to negotiate the next deal if that partner knows that they gave something to us for free. So it put us in an extraordinarily difficult situation. But on top of that, there's several disturbing things about this for me. First, He was serving us in the capacity as a PR agent. When the community reacts in an unexpected way and says, "Hey, this seems bad to me." What a professional PR agency does is they help the client. They turn around and they say, "Okay, DCG, like this is being taken poorly. Here's some key messages that we can put out that say, hey, look, this is a perfectly positive thing. They didn't really need our support in order to do it. All they're asking for is that our community members utilize this great tool they're building for us for free, whatever." That's not what that's not what Mark did. Mark turned the other way and started attacking along with all the pitchforks that were out and started stirring the pot. He acted unethically by releasing confidential information that was shared with him in confidence in his capacity as in his role. He used that privileged information against my team, and then he was disingenuous with the community, seeking to distance himself from something that he was intimately involved with for months, interacting in a way that would lead an observer to conclude that he had no idea what was going on, and was asking these great questions like whether or not any network funds were used to fund this other blockchain, when he knew or should have known the answers to those things because he was a participant to all of the calls. So, after those incidences and another one that I'll describe later, Ernesto did not feel like he could trust him with information. And I can't blame him. Glenn Austin, our CFO, says he had a positive, though infrequent, working relationship with Mark prior to last year. He worked with him on recovering funds from Charlie Shrem, his proposal that ended up not panning out, but he returned the funds, paying the Dash Trust invoices, custodying finances for the trust itself, governance proposal details, reconciliation between DCG and Rheingold's reward reallocation proposals. The list goes on. He's got a bunch here. He said the relationship was cordial and somewhat productive. Some things slipped through the cracks, but nothing out of the ordinary in a busy environment. Then in February of 2021, Mark and Glenn were brainstorming and debating a topic when Glenn says what started as a debate quickly turned personal. When Glenn didn't agree with Mark's perspective, Mark became irate. He said the DCG has been failing for years. Nothing good has ever come out of DCG. I, Ryan, am the main problem. He then attacked Glenn personally. He called him incompetent at his job and said that he was nothing but a yes man to my every whim. Glenn said he was really surprised, quote, was really surprised by the amount of anger/vitriol directed at me personally during this interaction. I quickly decided to disengage from the conversation because he frankly wasn't making sense and sounded insane. I also didn't see any point in turning the tirade into a shouting match from both sides, and I do not like getting personally insulted during a professional phone call. Mark later sent a message in writing to Glenn apologizing for, quote, biting your head off, end quote. But it was accompanied by reasons, as it always is. I've gotten an apology from Mark before. It is always accompanied by, but I'm just so passionate about Dash and I want Dash to be successful. So, that's the reason I yelled at you, or that's the reason I, really pushed it with that partner, or whatever the case may be, or that's why I'm pointing out to you typos that an employee of yours made and wanted you to be aware that they made a typo. Like, it's always accompanied by a but, and it doesn't even feel like a real apology. So, Glenn didn't accept the apology. He does continue to work with Mark to pay the trustees. He's participated in articles, but needless to say, Glenn has not reached out seeking Mark's opinion since that incident. Myself, I've had recent communications with Mark that eroded my personal trust and that I'm willing to share. In the wake of various other conflicts between my staff and Mark, I attempted to discuss them with him in July of last year in a call that lasted 4 to 5 hours. The first half of the call was frankly incredible to me. I experienced something similar to Glenn, though instead of disengaging, I went head to head with Mark. We were both yelling at each other for about half of the call. At least 2 hours, I would say. During the call, Mark told me the following. He told me I had never contributed anything of value to the network. When I responded to that and said, I have a lot of critics, but I don't think anyone can credibly argue I've never done anything positive for the network, and I don't feel the need to defend myself to you. And his response to that was, name one thing you've ever done. And so I said, okay, Mark, I conceived of the diff. I put a proposal up to have it funded. I worked with the lawyers for better part of a year to see it come to fruition. And then I stepped away from it and turned it over to the community. That's a valuable asset. I think we can all agree. He dismissed it, said that that was the lawyer's work, and was very disparaging towards everything else that I've done. And I said, I'm not going to go point by point and explain to you things that I've done that have benefited the network. He also claimed that if not for him, Dash would be nowhere. And he said that I am the primary cause or primary reason Dash is not doing better than it is. So it was extremely insulting. He also expressed that DCG should not be doing business development and marketing activities, believed that the community would back him on this because of a 20-person poll that he took on Discord. And he indicated something might be in the works to make that happen. This was in July of last year. I tried counseling him that, in my experience, Discord may not be representative of the entire community. I also suggested that a formal proposal would be unlikely to pass and that he might consider taking a less formal path to seeking additional input from the community as a next step. One option I suggested is polling through the external polling system that we have so that more varied ideas could be proposed rather than a simple no, yes, no vote on his specific idea. He claimed to have talked to most of our developers in that call and that everyone was unhappy with me as a manager. This was not true. I spoke with some of the developers afterwards, and he spoke to, I believe, 3. And they were not talking about me. They were talking about another manager that was unnamed. Mark made the assumption it was about me. And so everything was positioned out of context. He also expressed anger that I had not given him credit for a particular trading service that had launched on our network. I pointed out that DCG was not a partner. We were not the one that brought them in. He claimed that DCG was using this service for its own trades, and that was the reason I should have given him credit publicly. And I said, that's not true. We do not use this service. And he responded by saying, this is how incompetent you are. You don't even know what your own CFO is doing. And I said, Mark, I assure you, I know what my CFO is doing. I know where we trade. I see all of the trades. We review them. We review financials frequently. We review our partnerships and who we use to liquidate assets. And I explained where we do our trades and how we handle it. He persisted to call me a liar and incompetent. I then said, well, if you really must know, I'll even give you the reasons why we don't use them. And so I explained the reasons. They were mainly having to do with our accounting system. At which point he continued to call me a liar and said that he had spoken to the partner and had confirmed with them that we use them. And I said, well, at one point we were in a conversation with them. They did present to us. We were going to. We actually asked for an application. And before submitting it, we realized that we would end up spending a lot more hours than the cost savings that we would achieve, and that it wasn't worthwhile because all the trades would have to be entered manually rather than automatically ingested into our systems. He still did not believe me. And I posed a theoretical question at that point, and I said, Mark, why on earth would I be insisting on this, that we're not a party to this thing, and that we don't trade on this system when it is easily verifiable? You could call up the partner and find out. Anyone could, right? And his response was, and I didn't intend him to actually call the partner. It was a theoretical question, right? Like, why would I do this? And his response was, oh, I will. I will call them. And to me, it's just like, I'm not even creative enough to come up with these reasons on the spot as to, and I don't know what my motivation would even be for lying to him. But it is this deep, deep distrust of me and of DCG that I can't fathom. I don't know what I have done to deserve this level of mistrust where I can't even.
So it appears that there has been a significant amount of interpersonal strife between the two of you. And I mean, we'll go back to the very beginning of it in just a second, but it appears that there's kind of like there's personal issues at play here. And you mentioned quite a few, I would say, specifics of what one could call hostile communication in private messages, for example. Now, that's obviously from one party. Other parties to this. So I assume that you've been just as you are right now, right? Like calm, relatively calm and level-headed in all of your personal dealings with Mark as well, right? That it's been a one-sided kind of shouting match from one side, or is that?
No, I have lost my temper on one occasion.
Okay.
I have lost my temper during that conversation over the summer. It had escalated to the point where I could not let it go anymore. I couldn't let my staff continue to suffer and be uncomfortable, and I was attempting to address it, and I thought I could work my way through some of those things. All that call did was illustrate that there was no progress to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on that call, he also complained about Omar quite a lot. It came up no less than 7 times. I asked him if he ever had provided any feedback to Omar on this, and he said no, he hadn't, and I encouraged him to. I then called Omar after the call, and I said, hey, he thinks you should be handling certain situations a lot differently, or that you don't handle partner interactions appropriately, and he evidently has feedback for you. He didn't share any of the specifics. He just complained that he was awful and terrible and incompetent. And so I told him, hey, you might want to approach him and ask him if he has any feedback. And when Omar did, he denied saying anything. He said, well, he didn't deny saying anything. Let me correct myself.
Mm-hmm.
He said he doesn't recall saying any of those things. And so I have a hard time believing that because it came up no less than 7 times. It was a theme throughout the entire conversation. And that eroded trust with Omar, in addition to the incident that we outlined earlier. So I have other examples from Fernando, from partners, all kinds of. This is a pattern that goes back a long time. We do our best to work with him, but where we're at is he's wearing many hats. Sometimes he's our PR agency. Sometimes he's our biggest critic. Sometimes he's a DCG competitor for funds seeking to do more marketing and business development and PR work for the network. Sometimes he can be accusatory and insulting towards us or our partners. He can easily tip from assertive to aggressive. when he disagrees with someone, he's willing to disclose information that's shared under NDA when it suits his purpose. And he's willing to share selective information, including NDA material, with the community in a manner that distances himself from any controversy and incites mistrust for DCG. So I ask you, like,
Mm-hmm.
how are we supposed to continue collaborating as tightly as possible under these circumstances? Partners and employees of our partners should not, this is my position,
Mm-hmm.
partners and employees of our partners should not be required to work with Mark if they don't want to, just as they would not be required to work with any PR firm we had if they didn't want to. DCG employees should not be required to work with Mark if they don't want to either. That said, I have encouraged DCG employees to continue working with Mark to the extent that they feel that the situation is safe to do so. I believe it's prudent to limit the amount of confidential information that is shared with Mark to protect the network from harm. And that means sharing information as it becomes public and not much before. And it becomes restricting, and that means restricting access to information from our partners that is under NDA, which I would add is usually required to do a press release. So we do share some information with Mark prior to it becoming public when the risks are low. One example, Brian is actively working with Mark right now on some product related announcements. And I'm not standing in his way. I do caution him to be careful with what he shares and so on. Just be prudent, be thoughtful. I do stand by my recommendation to the DIF to leverage other providers to announce their partnerships and to work with their partners. In the case of the DIF, they have no marketing or PR function, which means Mark would be operating unsupervised and poses, in my opinion, significant risk to their relationships. So I stand before the community today, and I'm telling you that the advice that I gave to the DIF, I stand behind 100%.
Okay, well, let's dig into the details a little bit. So there's clearly a personal issue, and that is, that's been gone over quite exhaustively here. Previous to that, you mentioned two diff partners that in one case, the diff partner had an issue with the way Mark was conducting himself. In the other case, an employee of the diff partner had an issue, and the employee was then removed from the situation, from having to deal with that, and the diff partner as a whole is more than happy to work with them. So we have a case of a diff partner. I mean, and this is not to say there haven't been negative interactions or things like that. It's just to say as far as the numbers go, there's one that is currently having an issue. Now, we mentioned those things, right? About specific diff partners having issues. And there have been many mentions of information that was under NDA that was publicly shared. Now, obviously, we're in a weird catch-22 situation because we're trying to shed public light on a lot of these things that, based on their NDA nature, cannot really be verified. So it's at the same level of one versus the other. So that being said, would you be willing to share absolute specifics, right? As in which partners, which NDA, which time, specifics to trust protectors for transparency reasons, obviously under condition that they're not going to just share those.
I would welcome an investigation into my own behavior, and that is within the jurisdiction of the trust protectors. In fact, some of the DIF supervisors are trust protectors, and I have shared the information with the DIF on who the names of those partners are and the specifics of those situations, and they themselves made that decision. As far as the decision to counsel the other CEO, I think it strengthened the relationship between the network, and that company, because it eliminated a situation that an employee they had was uncomfortable with while preserving the relationship with Mark. I wasn't seeking to
Mm-hmm.
separate Mark. I was there to counsel the CEO that he had a situation brewing within his own organization of an employee that was uncomfortable. And I wanted to clarify, too, that this is a third party.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So to answer the
and
question, then yes, right? You would be willing to back up
absolutely,
every single one to the trust
absolutely.
protectors.
I would welcome an investigation if the trust protectors would like to pursue one. I would point out that Mark is a trust protector and would, of course, need to exclude himself from that process. I do want to reiterate, I don't think Mark is evil. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
he's a villain. He's worked a lot of years and a lot of hours for Dash. And we all owe him a debt of gratitude for the things that he's done. Many of his contributions are also positive. It's not universally true that Mark has problems with every single one of our partners. That's not the case. I believe there are some things that he does really well. And I think that Mark genuinely cares about making the network successful, but I also think he believes that DCG is the thing holding the network back. And what I have an issue with is that he didn't run for Trust Protector on that platform. Um, I do think that Mark thinks very little of me personally, and I think that that extends to the rest of my team. That's evident in the comments he makes to other people saying, "Oh, you just do
Mm-hmm.
whatever Ryan says to do, or whatever. You have no independent thought. You're a yes man." I think he has a mentality that I am evil. Unfortunately, Mark also struggles to compartmentalize in different roles that he plays within the network, and he's caused a range of various breaches of those roles and confidential information. So if he wants to find out who's blackballing him, he needs to go find a mirror. I am not the one doing it. He is the one who, you know, Glenn and Mark have a falling out. Fernando and Mark have a falling out. Ernesto and Mark have a falling out. I and Mark have a falling out. Omar and him have a falling out. Uh, Darren is seeing these same behaviors. I don't think they've had a falling out, but I mean, the partners have had falling out with him where they don't want to work with him anymore, even though he's providing supposedly free services, right? So, not supposedly, they are free to the partners. So, the common theme here is not me. I am not. I am not out here trying actively to maximize the damage on Mark. If that were the case, I would have gone to the diff with all of this stuff, right? I've got pages of examples. And I would have maximized the damage. I isolated it to here are the two incidences you guys have to deal with. And here's my recommendation because I see a pattern. And I stand behind that.
Yeah, so let's let's hit on the specifics. So obviously there's been a Dashcore group is not working with Mark currently. And
That is not true. Let me
so
explain these last two press
in which
releases too,
capacity?
because there's some misconceptions about it.
Mm-hmm.
Omar left us at the end of January, and in the final week of January, there were two press releases. Now, normally Omar would hand those off to him, but Omar was handing stuff off to Ernesto, and during the handoff, those two fell through the cracks.
Mm.
It is true that we excluded him from those two, but it was an error and not intentional. We do include him and share with him the information. He does a business wire on that and tries to get articles written based on those business wires. I think he does some personal outreach as well to people that he knows that might be interested in writing an article. That's the normal process. We're also working with him on other announcements and things that we're doing. So it's not true that we're not working with him. That is a false narrative. Brian is actively working with him right now on some product related announcements.
So in which
it's just not
capacity
a true statement.
are you not working with him then? Because like as we're mentioning, things get muddied when we're between hats and things, and there's obviously a mixing of personal disagreements and personality clashes with the need to professionally work together regardless. So clearly, so the last two releases were it was through error or fault by DCG BizDev that they were not sent out, not deliberately. But in
Right.
what ways has DCG decided to scale back their, or has DCG decided to scale back their involvement with Mark?
We do not share non-disclosure covered information, at least not without getting partner permission, because we aren't sure what role he will play with that information, whether he'll use it against us or not, or whether he will attempt to disclose it to the community or something else. So we
So
try to
nothing
share
under
it
legal
late in the
NDAs.
process as well, so that if there is a breach, it's right before it was going to get announced anyway or something. Um, I certainly don't seek his advice and counsel at this point, and neither
Mm-hmm.
do any members of my staff, to my knowledge. But that's their personal choice. I don't dictate that to anybody. I think he's just burned enough bridges with people here where people don't enjoy working with him. And let me address this issue of the personal dispute stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of people I don't personally like. I have no problem with it. I'm a professional, right? Um, and I didn't take all of these incidences to the community at the time that they occurred because you know, none of them are. This is. I'm not here to put out. I don't think it's healthy for DFOs to be attacking one another. It isn't. This is a last resort for me.
Mm.
I hate doing this stuff. When I was being attacked by George Donnelly and I was being attacked by the Kubikash people, I hardly responded to them. I definitely don't like being the one who's actually doing the attacking. This is bad for our community when we start accusing each other of things. But I think the community needs to know at this point that the relationship is so degraded that I don't see how we can work together. But that has had nothing to do with how much we like each other or not, or
Yeah.
whether I personally have issues with Mark. I am trying to mitigate risks to our relationships. I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to make this a good place to work for my employees by not requiring them to share everything with Mark. I'm counseling people on how to work within the constraints that, frankly, he is creating in the relationship. And so I'm doing my best. And if the network wants us to continue to work with Mark, we will continue to work with Mark in the maximum capacity we feel like we can, as unpleasurable as that is for me personally. I am happy to do it. But it is definitely not making our jobs easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I would much prefer a professional PR firm to provide those services to us because they would behave professionally. They would not turn their backs on us. They would not be attacking us in public. At least that would not occur. And so, you know, I really have an issue with the positioning of things with the community in a way that distances himself from controversy when he's involved. And I definitely mistrust him when he's posting NDA material and then posting something that can only be meant to stir up controversy. I can't think of another reason why. And I don't know why he hates me so much. He probably
Yeah.
hates me a lot more after today, but I don't frankly care. I,
Well,
I, I think it's gotten to the point where it's just so broken.
yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree. The relationship does not seem to be working super well. And diff supervisors did say that when they were received a heavy briefing, again, quote in quotes, on not using Mark's services for the diff, they remarked it was bizarre and out of character for you, and no evidence was provided, and that you are not a fan of Mark at all. So it's clearly like a two-way street, and I understand that like once escalations happen, things can get a little messy. But let's just talk about like kind of where do we go from here. So first off, this has clearly been an issue, and obviously all of the personality conflicts aside, there's been an issue that's gotten in the way of work for quite some time. And the network has not, I mean, kind of just frankly, has not been made light of this at all up until, I guess, this moment, right? Until the issue was kind of
Up
forced.
until last Thursday.
And so if this is an issue that is quite, if this is important enough that the diff should be briefed, diff supervisors should be briefed and highly recommended to not work with a partner. Don't you think that should be something that the entire network should know about ahead of time? Especially since we're talking about the masternodes make funding decisions on proposals, etc., based on information. And this seems like extremely pertinent information that there are troubles getting a working relationship going in this case. And it seems like that would affect voting decisions, probably, let me be honest, on both sides of the aisle on what to fund or what not to fund. So, for example, if someone knows, hey, the diff has been recommended to not use the one PR firm or the one PR entity that we consistently have in-house in the network. That and there's nothing else right now. Like it's literally we're not going to do PR kind of for now because the one we're using is not viable according to your prognosis. Now, isn't that something that everyone should sort of know about? Isn't that kind of incredibly damaging to not know that this relationship has been at least recommended to be discontinued, and that some of the larger achievements in Dash's modern history might not actually have coverage fall between the cracks because of something like this?
I mean, there is a there's a tension here
Mm-hmm.
between uh, transparency and discretion that you don't want to take every dispute that you have with someone that you're trying to work with to the community, right?
Mm-hmm, of course.
um, First of all, that's not a healthy way. Privacy is almost required in order to reach agreement with one another and open up enough to share enough of yourself and enough of what's going on to be able to reach an agreement, right? Like, um, if you were to attempt to, so, I mean, in any relationship, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's some vulnerability that comes into play with it, even with people that you don't, uh, like work with all that much. I share things with Mark, and the degree to which you end up trusting them is what do they do with that?
Mm-hmm.
Do they treat it with care and respect? Do they use it against you? And so we all have good intentions here. The diff has good intentions. DCG has good intentions. I even think that Mark has good intentions. He thinks that serving the network means undermining DCG at times. That to him, if it's a good way to force me out or whatever, I think he views that as a positive thing. But I don't know when that break point occurs. I think the question should be posed to the diff, right? Should they have disclosed that they were making this decision at my recommendation? I would have given them authorization to say that publicly. That would have caused damage to Mark. It would have caused damage um, uh, and we don't necessarily want to damage other DFOs in the
Mm-hmm.
process just because we don't want to use them in a certain capacity. So at what point does it become my responsibility or the diff's responsibility to start pointing fingers, right? Or pointing out issues with other DFOs? It's unsavory, certainly, but you know, I probably waited too long with this one. When it became apparent that I had no hope of ever reconciling the differences between DCG staff, not just me, DCG staff
Mm-hmm.
as a whole, and Mark, and we were never going to be comfortable working together, we probably should communicate to the community. And that's a learning for me, is recognizing when that line has been crossed. I don't think it's healthy for us to highlight every dispute publicly just because we don't agree or we were
Mm-hmm.
unhappy with something. I'm not going to go crying to the network and say, oh, but this happened and I'm unhappy with it. That just leads to infighting. And I'm seeking to work with this person again in the future, right? I,
Yes.
I bad mouthing them in public is not the way to get there. So, in the interest of preserving relationships, you don't do those things. You don't call people out publicly, even when you disagree. But probably the point at which I should have highlighted it is after like August, probably after the Horizon incident. That should have been the point where it's like, okay, there's active misdirection occurring here with the community,
Mm.
and that's not okay.
Yeah. So it seems like based on from August onwards, there's been a a a actual like working problem, not just this could boil over into a working problem, but there's actually been disruption of promotion PR activities on the network, and
Yes,
so
I would agree with that statement. I think that they are at this point somewhat impaired
so
because
six
of
months.
that
So
strain. And
let me
I
look
will
at the
say this:
yes,
Mark has not had a funding proposal since that time.
yes,
So I don't know if that would have triggered me to say something at that point, but I don't think after August we have had a high functioning relationship. We have done our best. I will say
hmm
that. Many of our employees have this. This is a topic that we discuss frequently: is how much to share, when to share, how to involve him. We
hmm
don't want to be a bad player. We don't want to be a bad
yes.
player for the network. So
Well,
it's
let's shift
been
off
a
from
difficult period.
Mark specifically and his
Yeah.
proposal. But it seems like for the last 6 or so months, there has been a PR disruption in the Dash network, and MNOs have voted and continued to vote based on the assumption that this was not the case because this was not made public. That DCG was having problems with a key PR partner, which were affecting deliverables and announcements, and the same thing and that the diff had been recommended to not use a specific partner, and that there's none lined up at the moment. And so MNOs have been making voting decisions blind for 6 months, if I'm being really frank. They have not known that this issue critical to promotion of the network, which has always been one of the weakest spots of the Dash ecosystem, has existed for 6 months. So I think you could have let me be very clear on this. I think this should have been. I think the Masterminds had a right to know this 6 months ago, and this is not has nothing to do with Mark at this point. This has something to do with the entities working with Mark, and more specifically, the person who heads up DCG, and also the person who made the recommendation to the diff that they should not use their only easily accessible, currently operating PR alternative. And so, do you think that kind of there's a culture of secrecy accusation against DCG that's been going on for 5 7 years? I don't know how long, but it's been a
Yeah.
consistent
We,
theme.
we've been frequently at the receiving end of some.
Yes, and this doesn't seem to build trust with the community. That a major issue has been, I guess, kept from them, and the only reason it has come to light is because there's been a giant drama storm and calls, defund GCG because this and that. It's been a huge explosion of drama, and that's the only let's be frank, that's the only reason we're here today. I'm always
Yeah.
happy to give a forum for people and all areas of Dash to express themselves. But the only reason that I was specifically asked for that was because this kind of got out of hand. So
Yeah.
don't you think, do you think that the network deserves a little better, that this needs to become much more transparent much sooner?
I think the criticism is fair. I think the criticism is fair. I think that the moment that I realized I could not salvage the relationship, and the moment that it spread to diff partners, um, and I want to be clear, I was not the only one recommending to the diff that they not use Mark. Um, but the moment that it spread to the diff and the diff's own supervisors were recommending not to use Mark, one or more of us should have come to the network and explain the reasons why and been transparent that we don't intend to use them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, that's probably the learning here for me. I'm a human too, and I'm flawed, and I haven't handled everything perfectly in this whole situation by a far stretch. It is a difficult situation. I don't think anyone would be capable of handling it perfectly or knowing the perfect time at which to, you know, pull the plug on the relationship, to attempt to reconcile it, to communicate things to the network discreetly, to communicate things to other DFOs discreetly that might be affected by it. All of these things, it is really difficult to navigate, and I don't think I handled it perfectly. Um,
So,
so I think your criticism is fair, and the criticism I'm receiving is fair criticism. It should not have gone as long as it did. I do think that if he had sought funding for the same purpose to play this role yet again, I would have probably more vocally opposed it, um, and attached my name against it. But that's speculation. I won't know until I'll never know the answer to that question on how I would have handled it if he would have come to the network with another proposal. When the accusations started coming my way, that I was blackballing him, I think that's a complete misrepresentation. We do continue to work with him. Had he reached out to me privately, I would have explained the recent situations, but he didn't do that. And so, I'm coming to you late,
mm-hmm.
but I'm coming to you. And I'm sorry to the community that I didn't raise these issues more proactively or communicate that we weren't planning on using them. Now, I think it would have been premature on his last funding proposal because I hadn't given up on reconciling things at that point. That occurred over the summer, and in particular with the Horizon incident. And so I think that we're kind of at a stage where we have put a proposal up to the network for marketing that included PR services. That proposal was approved. There was some controversy around it. Some of the community members accused us of altering the text after it was approved and including PR. That wasn't the case. It was always there. And luckily, the Internet Archives had captured a screenshot of the proposal while it was up. So we can prove that we had not altered that. But there was some controversy around that. And we are seeking a PR firm. However, since the proposal went live, the price moved away from us. And that was one of many items that were included in that funding. And we're debating right now what gets cut because there just wasn't enough USD that resulted from the proposals that got approved to do all of the things that funding was slated for. So
let's be
we are going
clear
to
on
have to
that
make
part
some hard
then.
decisions, but we have been interviewing PR firms.
So a PR firm has been sought, or funding for a PR firm has been sought by DCG in order to fill a void. that the network did not know and was not informed existed, right? Because the supposition is the newsroom handles this. And when DCG asks for funding specifically for something else, but is not forthright with why, of course, there can be many reasons, but if there isn't enough, basically, if PR needs aren't being met, and that's why there's sought to find another entity, then that you see how that's not exactly an honest and forthright way of requesting funding. Of we need PR, but don't we already have PR? Well, we kind of do, but it's non-functional PR for various reasons described today. But we're not going to tell you. We're just going to ask for money and just say trust us. And that's another count against the whole secrecy thing. Is you're asking for money and you're not telling people why you need it, or not telling people key reasons for why you should need it. It's sort of like saying, hey, hey mom, can I borrow $100 real quick? Why? Oh, nothing.
Well,
When
I
you actually
disagree
broke
with
the window.
the assertion that we didn't argue why we needed a PR firm. That was included in the proposal. But what we didn't do is disparage Mark. I'm not, this going back to the accusation, I'm trying to blackball him. I'm not trying to blackball him. I'm like, I actually think that certain things Mark does really well and are valuable for the network. But what we did say is that here are the things that an external PR firm brings to the table.
Mm-hmm.
We did not say, here are all the problems with Mark. And like I said, I don't know where to draw the line between, and not everyone is, regardless of where I draw the line, not everyone is going to agree with me on whether I am disparaging other DFOs too quickly based on, I don't know, one incident, two incidences. Well, it's only been three incidences. At what point is it okay to start disparaging other DFOs and taking it public? I don't know where to draw that line.
I can actually answer that.
There's no perfect answer.
The one answer, at the point at which you make public that a relationship is not working out, is definitely at the point at which you start seeking another one. So, for example, let's just the allegory of like you're dating someone.
I think it's even before that. I think it's even before that. Because in this
possibly
conversation,
even worse then.
I think it's at the point that we decided that we could not work fully with him.
Yes.
And so I think that was this summer. And so I take the criticism. I know what you're trying to say. I think even your suggestion is too late. At the point at which we're seeking someone else, that's even later than the point at which we decide that we can't continue working with this individual. And so I would bump that up. And the learning for me here, like I said, I'm flawed. I make flawed decisions all the time. Trust me. And I will take ownership of this one with the community. I screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to raise my hand when I screwed up. And I will say that I did not raise this to the community soon enough. I waited until he raised it to the community. And honestly, Mark deserved better from me, because Mark has done a lot for our network. And if I made the decision that, we need to be more judicious in what we share and when we share it, and others on my team have made the same conclusion and they're not comfortable sharing the information, and it's gotten to the point where the functioning of the relationship is seriously degraded, Mark deserves to know the reasons why. Now, I did attempt to share those over the summer, but he doesn't deserve to find out, because it just the well dries up and he's not getting things. So I could have been more explicit with Mark than I was, that we were eroding the relationship and that it wasn't functional anymore. I tried to convey that over the summer in our July conversation, but it certainly didn't help.
Yeah, and it's not just for Mark; it's also the DFOs the MNOs, the master node operators, not knowing that there was this deficit. And let me add to that point as well, can you confirm that Dashcore Group was contracted, or at least had given an affirmative that they would be taking charge of marketing the Dash Direct app? And let me obviously preface this with Marshall from Ionia has made it very clear that while they are happy to get earned media wherever they can and share on socials and things like that, they do not market products. They create products for partners, in this case Dash. And this is where it gets a little murky, because Dash is a decentralized network. Dash Core Group is an entity within that network, so sometimes there can be a blurring of the lines and confusion. But was Dash Core Group supposed to be the one marketing, the primary marketer of the Dash Direct app?
The answer to that question is yes. There are 3 entities that were party to this agreement. The DIF invested, of course, in PrePay, now Ionia. Dash Core Group agreed to backstop the development costs to the extent that they are not offset by or defrayed by usage. So there's a profit margin that Ionia gets on every transaction, and that goes towards paying off their development costs. If after a certain period of time their development cost is not paid off, we agreed to backstop that. So it's under the limit that all of our proposals say that we will spend with any given partner. All the proposals that we put up say that if it exceeds a certain amount, and I think it's $20,000 or something like that, that Dash Core Group would put up a separate proposal for that item. So all of our business partnership agreements are fairly low cost. As part of that agreement, so it is true that Ionia does not market any products other than the PrePay app itself. They're obviously responsible for their own version of the app. With partners, what they typically do is they have a revenue share agreement with the partner. And in our case, we took our revenue share and passed it on to the user. So right? So that's why you get a higher discount than you would in any other version of the app. And so we don't generate revenue from that relationship, but that contract specifies that a portion of our revenue goes to pay off the development costs, and a portion of the revenue goes towards extra discounts for our users. And when the development cost gets fully paid off, by the way, the discounts will get better. So there's tiers baked into the contract where once we reach certain volumes, they will increase our savings rates. And so those are the elements of the contract. Now, with each of their partners, in order to get that revenue share, they have to bring users, right? So they have contracts, and I won't share names, but they have contracts with partners. The partners will disseminate that or cross-sell it or whatever to their users. And then they get the revenue share associated with it. Now, we are the marketing partner in that relationship because they don't do their own marketing. And what that means for us is marketing it to our own community here in the US. We've also run an ad campaign in Miami and another one in Austin with car toppers that had the Dash Direct, was advertising Dash Direct on those. So these are like taxi cabs and Uber drivers and stuff like that. And they were expected to generate around 10 million impressions. And indeed, they confirmed that Ionia has confirmed to us that they see disproportionate number of users of the Dash Direct app in those locations. or at least in Florida, where the biggest effort went. I'm not sure about Austin or Houston. I can't remember where it was, but in any case, we do market it. We don't have a large marketing budget to market outside of our community. So we do hammer it hard within our community. We include it on our website. Those are the ways that we're trying to market Dash Direct. We do not have control over the Dash Direct website. That is something that Ionia wishes to retain. So that does limit some of the things we can do. We can't like edit that website or create a landing page for an ad campaign and stuff like that. And at least not on our own. We have to propose those things and then we rely on them to make the changes. So we try to host some of that stuff on our own website. But yes, we are responsible for marketing that to our users.
Yeah.
And we've tried to use those general ads to a general audience to test the degree to which we can bring in new users. And so, yeah, we are responsible for marketing and growing the app. They are not responsible for incurring marketing expenses. Basically, the marketing expenses normally go to the partner, or the marketing dollars associated with the transactions go to the partner. In our case, they don't. They go to our users. So Dash Core Group doesn't get any revenue from the relationship to be able to go and do marketing. And so we have to work within our budget.
Well, let me so I tallied up the DCG marketing budget for the few proposals explicitly labeled marketing over the last year were 2,255 dash. And at the present, and that doesn't include, as far as I'm aware, core compensation for salaries for people who are doing that kind of work. The current Dash Direct downloads are between 500 and 1,000 downloads. And diff supervisors have mentioned to me dissatisfaction in DCG's marketing ability as far as, or the results of marketing, or the, especially now that the virtual MasterCard release is out in a public beta and will, I guess soon, hopefully, be out in a full release. They've expressed dissatisfaction with the lack of available resources on DCG's part to be able to bring this to market beyond, a few hundred users that we're at today. And a big part of this was, again, we're not talking to not speak ill of anyone, but basically Dashcore Group hired a marketing person with whom I've had a great relationship, and I will not say anything disparaging on. Her absence from the Dashcore Group today in some ways may indicate that whatever happened, it did not end up working out. And that's not, again, a disparagement to anyone in any way. Clearly, Dashcore Group invested specifically in marketing in this last year. And I've heard testimony that of all the candidates selected, you made a personal appeal on this specific candidate. And we have that, and then we have the marketing budget, and we have the, I would say, limited results so far. And now we have a situation where there just don't seem to be available resources to fulfill DCG's obligation to market or take the Dash Direct app to market. And so I don't think a lot of that has been made fully public. I don't think there's been a public message on, okay, this was our responsibility. We took the following steps. We accrued the following funding and directed them towards this. And we are unable to produce further results on this. And let someone else have at it, for example. So I don't know if you just want to address that part.
Okay, there was a lot there. I'm just pulling something up too because Yeah, so I think that with the marketing budget that we've had, um, the um, a lot of the effort that has gone into improving the marketing function has been there's been quite a bit of say infrastructure that's been put in place,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically, you can run an ad campaign, but if you can't measure it, you're not going to be able to improve it. And we didn't have tagging on our website. We didn't have um, analytics on our website. We didn't have heat maps. We didn't have
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, a lot of the things that you would need in order to figure out where people are coming from, even. And so some of the initial tasks there were in getting the uh, getting the infrastructure in place so that when we did start running ad campaigns, we could actually measure things and determine, like A/B testing, for example, of two messages. Which messages are resonating more? Well, if we can't see where the traffic is coming from and can't tag them to a specific ad that people are flowing to our website through, we're not going to be able to do those things. And so the idea was we're going to waste a lot of money if we end up doing that without the proper infrastructure in place. And so a lot of the early work, and you can go back to say the Q2, Q3 calls and look at the marketing section presentation on all of the things that were done. A lot of it was related to that. And it's not highly visible work, but I believe that it is necessary in order to ensure that when we do start deploying marketing dollars, that we are able to actually make sure that we can measure results and cut things off that aren't working and double down on the things that are working better. Um, a lot of that work was outsourced. We didn't have capacity internally to do all that stuff, and that does cost money. Those services, they're not highly visible to anyone, right? And so even though progress may be being made, I think that people look at that and say, well, you know, we allocated dollars and we didn't see ads, right? Because that's what they think of when they think of advertising. Um, the ad campaign that we ran in Miami uh, had an estimated 10 million impressions. Um, that included both Dash and Dash Direct branding, I believe. And uh, it did increase, according to Ionia, our downloads from that region. I haven't seen specific numbers, but I have requested them. What number did you say we have in terms of users downloads or whatever?
It is because the Google Play Store does not tell us uh, exact numbers. This is just
Yeah.
what's visible to anyone. It's 500 plus is where it's been for a little while. So between
Okay.
500 and under 1,000.
Okay, that is not true. I cannot disclose partner information without permission. I'll see if
Mm-hmm.
I can get Marshall's permission to share this, but the number as of today is outside of that range.
Well, that's definitely promising. Now, as far as setting up analytics and things, obviously anything at a major scale requires like a major scale budget. However, at the smaller scale, we're still able to, for free, get a lot of these kinds of things. So, for example, I'm just pulling something random out here that I thought of. Um, the Dash community Twitter handle made a tweet which had no boosting behind it. We did not put any advertising money behind, just a random tweet that costs no money that says, hey, Dash Direct, blah, 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 download it. Under the analytics, it's quite easy to see that we had 3,000 or 35,959 impressions and specifically 210 link clicks from that. And the link click is a referral link for the Dash Marketing Hub that it runs through Ionia's backend. So however many of those conversions were done explicitly with our link, we will be able to know. And all this infrastructure, again, was free. We didn't have to spend a single dollar on it. Obviously, when you go for advanced analytics, this is not the case, right? With advanced analytics, you need to pay for that, for other things like that. But I guess it seems like a lot of the marketing budget was spent and effort was spent on creating a lot of more expensive analytical and tracking tools, which don't seem to have been leveraged very well yet, and which could have possibly gone towards promotional efforts leveraging current analytics. And so we're looking at the situation now where there is a pretty, from my understanding, again, this is what was posted by the head of marketing before departure, that there is a relatively dry marketing budget currently for the express purposes of the Dash Direct MasterCard release. Obviously, there's a lot of earned media that can be done. There's a lot of other groups that are going to be helping out, but it seems like all of the 2,200 or so Dash that were spent on this, very little seems to have, translated into trackable results that we're able to see.
Yeah. So here's my opinion on it. I think that a world-class marketing function would be extremely well funded. When we have surveyed some of the other projects in the space, they have on their core teams about 50% of the staff in marketing and business development, and about 50% of the staff in development. We have 2 people in marketing, and we have 2 people in business development. No, 3 people in business development currently. So, and then we have about 50 in tech. And so we're completely understaffed to be able to do any type of major marketing at our scale. And I think most of us within the community agree that delivery on the tech side is going to be important, and we prioritize that. But we aren't allocating enough towards marketing. Whether that's in DCG or out of DCG, we are not allocating enough towards marketing. We tend to be a very insular project, and I think we need to expand our marketing expenditures. One of the ways I was hoping to address this, honestly, was with the the changes to the proposal system that I was advocating for back in the end of 2020.
You mean
and that proposal did not pass
unspent
the
treasury,
network.
right?
Yeah.
The unspent treasury one. Yeah, I do.
It would expand the treasury from
agree
10 to
with you on that
20%,
one.
and even at that scale, we would be severely underinvesting compared to our competitors in the space. That said, we did outperform like Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin last year, which those are our closest competitors in the space as far as like similar functioning blockchains. So I think that our proposal system serves us well, but it could do a lot better if we had the option to scale that functionality up, and I'm an advocate for it. Within the 60% that DCG can spend, we can do very little. With the money we did get, I was anticipating being able to spend a lot more, a totally different scale than we're at right now at $104, right? $105. So remember, in the spring of last year, our price spiked into the 400s. When that happens, the ask that we have from the network for salaries starts to drop as a percentage of the network of the proposal. And we actually, at points last year, we did start ratcheting that down from the 50%. On top of that, we have a lot of fixed expenses like infrastructure. Like we don't need a larger test net when the price goes up, right? And when the price goes down, we still need that test net. So just as an example, that runs 15,000 a month. There's all kinds of other expenses, not quite 15,000, but pretty close. There's all kinds of expenses like that that we incur that are fixed in nature. It's the variable component is marketing and business development. And so when the price spikes, all of that extra money, including an extra set of percentages, can start going towards those things. And when the price crashes, our fixed costs almost eat up most of that budget. And so at the time we were making the decisions to hire external firms to get the website stuff done, like we had ambitions that were based on that price. And I agree with you that if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't spend as much on the infrastructure component because we would have been better off doing something that was quicker and dirtier with the money. But we were trying to scale it for something different. And when the price began to drop over the summer, that's when it became apparent that we need to shift our plans and priorities here because we're not going to be able to do the kind of huge marketing campaign that we envisioned. And so I get it. I look at it and I look at the situation. I think that something scrappy would have been the way to go rather than to invest in the infrastructure. Retrospect is always 2020, right? I'm not saying we wasted funds because I don't feel like they were a waste. I feel like there were some good things that were done with them. The marketing campaign in Miami created a lot of impressions in a market we deeply care about, in a market that has a large diaspora of Venezuelans. There's a lot of overlaps there that we can benefit from. But, you know, I think we can do better. What we brought in is, like, I know you guys haven't had the chance to meet him yet, but I'm really excited about him. His name is Chris. You may have had some interactions with him.
Yeah, he was on the podcast on last Friday.
Yeah. So he is, I think that he is a charismatic guy. He has a very entrepreneurial mindset. He has done scrappy marketing of his own in his career and has gotten great results with it. And I'm fully empowering him to kind of redirect us on this front and get us going in a direction that I think will allow us to do a lot with just a little.
And so let's
until we're doing those things well, I don't think we should be asking for large budgets. But
yeah,
I think that I think he'll be really effective. And sorry for putting you on the spot, Chris, and shining a spotlight on you. But
and I think he's a great dude. He's very energetic and has a good amount of experience in this kind of thing. But just taking it back to, at some point, we were clearly aware that the marketing strategy as deployed was not necessarily working. And that was not, again, communicated to the general public, or rather the voting public, the people who were the business partners of DCG, I should say, that this was not going to have the intended result and that we would have one of the better innovations of Dash's recent history that would not have sufficient marketing resources behind it. And this came to light because
I think
yes,
I think the expectation here is that, hey, when we say we're going to market this, we're going to market it like in ads or something like that. Our best opportunity to get users on that platform is within our own community to start, right? Like, that is the lowest hanging fruit. So that is tweeting about it, holding contests to have people, create a video or whatever. And you guys did some of that. It is putting it on our website. It's making sure our community knows about it. It is talking about it within our own uh, community to be able to get users. And then the users themselves need to encourage others to adopt it, right? Like, I tweeted about this at Thanksgiving here in the US. It's a big holiday for those outside the US. It's a big holiday here in the US where families and
Mm-hmm.
friends get together and spend quality time together. There's no distractions. It's all just about food and good times. It's my favorite holiday. But
Mm-hmm.
I encourage people to talk about Dash Direct with their families. You can finally have a reason to say, oh, why should I use crypto? Well, here's a reason. You can save
Yeah.
5%. Everybody's interested in that. So I think that when we approached this, the initial push was in getting our own users to adopt
Mm-hmm.
and then begin to market this externally. And we did that initially with the car toppers in Miami. We had some learnings from them. It wasn't a huge campaign. I think, you know, like I said, 10 million impressions. That sounds big, but it's not super expensive to get that number of impressions. And uh, we experimented with a couple of messages there to see how they resonated.
Mm.
The idea was we would continue to do that and continue to iterate. Um, I think, given the price where it is now, we just need to be scrappy. I don't think we can do that type of activity anymore um, until we get some momentum again, or until the market gets momentum again. One of the two. So, you know, I have a lot of confidence that Chris will bring a totally new dimension to what we've been doing, and uh, I would ask for a little bit of patience to see what types of things he comes up with. We're discussing ideas every week, and he's seeking input from the community too. I know he just launched a new Telegram channel that has gotten some great receptivity. If you haven't seen it, go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could give you specific directions on how to find it, but maybe Chris can go on Discord and share some of that. But I think that we have an opportunity to do scrappy stuff without a big budget, and we have
Yeah.
to.
Well, absolutely. And I guess a big budget and a budget are two different things as well. And I don't think that this "we need to be scrappy" message was communicated clearly by DCG up until now, unless you would count Arden's Reddit post when specifically people were asking her what kind of money did DCG have to allocate for this. And so we go into it. This is now a second example of not exactly the most transparent action where the information is of critical importance for the Mastodon community. In the first example, of course, was regarding press of a key partner that the network relied on to get out most of its information in a great capacity was no longer a viable working option for a period of about 6 months, and the community didn't know. Obviously, we already went over that. Now we talk about marketing, that a significant amount of funding, again, depends on definitions of significant, of course, but has been allocated towards marketing for DCG. Specifically, a lot of it would, what the impression would give, would be marketing DCG's obligation of Dash Direct. And now we're at the point with, we hit the scrappiness level, and I think a lot of MNOs would have really not liked to know that it was going that way before today. Like that they would need to make their own funding decisions differently, that they would need to maybe reprioritize funding,
Well,
request for proposal, other things like
I
that.
think there always has to be a first time that we talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There always has to be a first time that we talk about it. We're still in the process of formulating what this looks like, even. So, as soon as we know what we would propose, we will be posing that to the network, um, and sharing it and gathering input throughout a continuous process. It's not going to be here's the answer. It's going to be here's some potential answers. Let's get input from the community. Let's find out what's worth pursuing. Let's shape things that way. And we're at the very beginning stages of this. Chris joined us last month.
Yes.
So, I appreciate what you're saying. My pushback would be, well, we're still trying to formulate what that looks like, and we're doing it in conjunction with Chris. So I think the answer is help us to shape it. I don't know what the answer is completely yet, and to a certain extent, you know, I think that there wasn't we didn't have a specific uh, what's the word I'm looking for? We didn't have a specific not plan, but like a specific roadmap that we were
Mm-hmm.
going to communicate. We didn't have a marketing section on the last call because that is in transition. We're trying to figure out what to propose. Um, and so I think that there has to be a first time when we communicate it to the network. It should have a shape by the time we do.
Yeah, that seems to be the
In other
core.
words, we don't want to come with something that is not just unbaked, but we don't have the ingredients for yet.
Yes, that seems to be the core issue contention. Isn't that waiting to have a more baked solution? It's waiting to express that there is even a problem that needs a solution to begin with. I think that a lot of the network was under the impression that marketing in some way was being handled slash the previous plans were going well slash Dash Direct gets released, the marketing, the MasterCard version gets released, and it's handled. And not that, oh, we don't have the resources to handle this right now, and we're looking at scrappy ways of getting around our lack of resources. I think that that's a, if the Masters knew that, that would be a significant cause for alarm by this point. That rather than say, oh, by the way, there was a problem, here's our new solution, all at the same time, when the problem becomes a problem, and let's not make a mistake, this is a problem right now, uh, that should be made public. Same thing again with the press, with PR. There a problem arose, and there was months of deliberating on figuring out what would the solution be internally. Again, not as a community, not as a decentralized ecosystem, but as a single entity. And that single entity, in some ways, and it sounds confrontational to phrase it like this, I don't know other way to say it, but to a certain extent has withheld information from the rest of the network that the network would like to know. And by using the word withhold, I don't mean necessarily malicious or anything like that, but I
I
definitely
understand.
believe that the network should believe, that the network believes as a whole that they should have known there was a problem with marketing far before today, or there was an inadequacy in marketing for our top products today, and that there was an inadequacy or a disruption in PR before today.
Yeah, so on the PR front, I totally agree. On the marketing front, I think we've been trying a few things. None of us went into this knowing what would work. Did we know car toppers would work or not work? No, and I don't fault anybody if they didn't. We did see an uptick in downloads from that region, um, and there's limitations on the data as far as um, whether or not we can see before November like 17th or something like that. But by then the car toppers were already going out. If we were already getting a disproportionate portion from there, we just aren't able to track it.
Mm-hmm.
So the data seems to indicate that it was somewhat successful at achieving downloads and users. Um, but I mean, you can't know whether something is working or not until you try it. And the truth is, because of the way the data was, the unavailability of data prior to the card toppers going out, we don't know if the concentration in that area was because there's a natural concentration there. There's just a lot of Venezuelans there, maybe. And so we happen to get a lot of our users from Miami. But we know that a disproportionate number came from there during that time period. And we do know that after the campaign ended, there was a drop in growth from that area. And so it seems to indicate that the ads had some kind of effect. So I don't think that I had the perception that there were like problems with marketing that app. We were going by the game plan, which was let's experiment with some things. Let's try and determine whether or not we get good results from these things. Let's try a few different messages. So I don't really share the view that there was some kind of, issue that required like urgent communication to the masternodes. I think that I'm always willing to answer questions and offer my perspectives and this type of thing. If we're going to propose a different approach, we need some time to formulate it and to put it forward and say, okay, here's what we saw that we liked, and here's a couple of things we did that we didn't like. There were other activities that I don't think went as well as the car toppers did. But we at least need the ability to measure this stuff, and then we need the ability to try a few different things, determine what's working, and stop spending on the stuff that isn't. And I think we know at this point that, just given our fixed expenses, there isn't going to be a huge marketing budget. That means we have to be self-dependent to a large degree with things like videos in a home studio or something like that, that we can disseminate, and on topics that might resonate across the cryptosphere and things like that. So those are the types of things that we're beginning to look at now. And so I think it's just a function of our budget has changed significantly. We have different needs. And so let's go figure out what those are, and start addressing them. And that's what we're doing. So, I agree definitely with the situation with PR. I should have brought that to you guys sooner. I should not have let the situation fester as long as it did, and I take full responsibility for it.
So let's turn back the clock a little bit. I mean, I know there's a million things going on. Thanks for dedicating so much time to this. The consistent thing about the culture of secrecy thing also goes back. We did have a question pertaining to the entire Alt36 situation. A lot of that is, in the past. But for a quick rundown of the situation, Alt36 is a cannabis payment processor that was to leverage Dash payments. They submitted a proposal to the network, which, in the eyes of the network, constitutes a contractual relationship of some kind. The Alt36 CEO informed me he was not under this impression, that he was under the impression it was purely a grant, a no strings attached grant, with any concessions given to the community as a bonus. And as usual, every single Dash funded organization at the time was responding to an organization called Dash Watch, which was basically tracking and providing transparency, accountability. And Alt36 was not under the purview of this, and DCG in particular spoke out against Dashwatch attempting to do this function in this specific situation, which I understand there was not an understanding on that behalf on the Alt36 side. We just hit the whole narrative, and then we get back to the beginning. So
yeah.
The Alt36 ended up, for reasons outside of many of ours, I guess, for many of our outside reasons, not necessarily working out. At some point, there's been an appeal to masternode owners on a personal level to basically to fund Alt36 on invest directly in the project, and there at some point all 36 shut its doors, and I don't know when that time was, and that was not necessarily communicated to the community as far as I'm aware. As far as I'm aware, not everyone necessarily knows this either. So this has been a DCG sort of, not a DCG project, but a DCG shepherded project from beginning to end, shielded from a lot of the same constraints that other DFOs kind of have, and not
Okay.
necessarily done with, I would say, the maximum transparency. And the last bullet point I'd put on that is in the infamous, depending on your perspective, Palm Beach report, Tika Tiwari pointed out Alt36 is one of the major reasons to invest in Dash, and
Yeah.
that, again, we can't necessarily confirm, but there's rumor that that caused the significant euphoric price run up of 2017, and probably then one could correlate that to the opposite price action after that didn't end up coming to fruition. So obviously we try things, we fail at things, we try things, we succeed at things. However, it seems like there was not a lot of transparency on the DCG side on what had been agreed on behalf of the network, and the actual reports of progress of all 36 were not done with transparency. DCG did report on some things. Do you think that that's really do you think that that's kind of an example of a partnership site type mentality with the community?
Uh, so let me start by saying I don't agree that we have a
Mm-hmm.
culture of secrecy. To me, that is absurd because we take pains to share a lot of information and seek permission from partners to be able to share information whenever we can. We led the community in doing like quarterly reports and reporting out. We were the first to do it, um, and do it on an ongoing basis. Take questions from the community on an ongoing basis. It is true that we can't always share information, and there are business reasons why we can't. There are legal reasons why we can't. There are HR reasons why we can't. There are uh, privacy reasons why we can't, like a person's health or something like that. If they, hey, why did this person leave? Well, I can't always
Mm-hmm.
tell you guys that stuff. That's half the time it's personal, and when it's not personal, uh, you know, if we want to attract good employees, we can't be, um, transparent about the reasons why we canned somebody, for example. So, I think that we try to be transparent wherever we can, but we also have a responsibility to be a professional organization. We have that responsibility to our employees. We have that responsibility to our partners. And so we have a culture of trying to be as transparent as possible. We share our financials every quarter. Like we share what we spend the money on. And so we try to be as transparent as possible. Regarding the Alt 36 situation specifically, um, they sought funding in early 2017 at a point when, the price of Dash was I think it was like $45 or something the first time they put a proposal up. And so it was really prior to that whole run up. It was prior to the existence of Dashwatch. Alt 36 was providing monthly reports out to the community already in the form of PDFs that had updates on the project. I can't speak to how the CEO viewed the relationship between the network. I think it does fall short of a contract. Any proposal does. There's no legal enforceability of a grant. It's one of the reasons I advocated for the creation of the DIF and for the creation of Dash Core Group so that we can enter into contractual agreements on behalf of the network. Because there are risks when you don't have a legally enforceable contract that you can take to court. And so uh, what I my feeling was on it on at the time is that Dashwatch is a service to the network. I believe that Dashwatch served a valuable purpose. I believe that uh, if a proposal owner put up a proposal that says I don't wish to participate in this, or if they had said I will subject myself to audits by Dashwatch, that they should abide by that, both sides. So if the network approves something that says I will not subject myself to a Dashwatch audit and it gets approved anyway, that should be up to the MNOs. It's not up to me. It's not up to Dashwatch. And at the same time, uh, you know, the situation with Alt36 was their proposals went up before Dashwatch existed. So all of a sudden, Dashwatch shows up and starts knocking at their door. Somebody actually showed up at their office, believe it or not, demanding to see their financials and demanding to see stuff that they never agreed to because Dashwatch didn't exist at the time. I think it was Alt36's right to decline to participate. Now, the effect that might have is on a future proposal that they might have posted to the network. The network could take that into account and decide, well, is their own reporting good enough or not? I don't think Dashwatch had the right to demand that they succumb to their requirements. I don't think any DFO is under that obligation to any other DFO unless they agreed to it. And as part of their proposal, for example, if they had put up a proposal and they said, hey, we will participate in this process and it got funded, then I'd be fighting for the other fight. I'd be saying, no, you have to do this. You said that you would do it, right? And so my position is that Dashwatch is valuable, but it was optional. It was optional for those who wanted to participate. And the consequence of not participating is you may lose trust with the MNOs. But if you feel that you can garner that trust through other mechanisms like your own reporting, that's what DCG did. We did our own reporting, right? We report on a quarterly call to the community. We report our financials. We report what we did, all the business development deals that we brought in for the network, the development that we did, all of that gets reported. And so we didn't feel like additional reporting through Dashwatch would be beneficial to the network because it would take time away from us and away from them when it would be redundant with the reporting we were already engaged with. So that was my position on the time. I still think it's the right position to take. If Dashwatch were funded, I think that we all need to start putting in our proposals whether or not we would participate in that process. And that should affect the yes/no votes. As far as Alt36 and the way that things went down, it is unfortunate. I think that it had huge potential. I think that it probably was an idea that was 2 to 3 years ahead of its time because the banks either have specialized in cannabis or they specialized in crypto, and there was very little overlap at the time they were attempting to operate. And their banks essentially tried to shut them down over the crypto thing because they were cannabis banks. Now, at that point, the choice was, do we shut down and go with Dash and go with a crypto bank that won't bank cannabis? So basically, we have no business at all. Or do we put the Dash thing on ice and attempt to succeed using bank transfers with the banks that are at least okay with cannabis? And given a choice between shutting down or moving forward without Dash and hoping to be able to integrate it later, they actually had it turned on, by the way, for about 2 weeks, but they didn't advertise it because they were fearful the banks would find out. The banks did find out and told them they have to shut it off or they're closing their bank accounts. So, they were trying, I think. At some point, the CEO got forced out. They had a financing that fell through, that involved um, a really unfortunate set of circumstances for them. They were operating, but not able to really invest in growth.
Mm.
And when they ran into financial difficulty, they cut off sales staff, and that was uh, it was a swift end after that point. They never filed for bankruptcy. Um, they did cease operating and sell off the assets, to the best of my knowledge. With the new CEO, I have not had great communication. I've attempted to reach out, but that was a situation that I wish would have turned out differently. We all do, and you know, I think that that was one of the reasons I created the diff, is because we need equity stakes in these companies that we're attempting to get started if we're going to do that type of thing again. And if the diff existed, I don't know if it would have turned out differently. I don't think it would have. I think the issues that they faced were not related to Dash, other than the banking issues. And so I'm not sure it would have turned out differently, but the diff definitely would ensure that it doesn't, going forward, we're not going to have a situation where the CEO views it as goodwill towards the
Mm.
community for funding their startup. No, we're equity holders now.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the way the whole Alt 36 thing shook out, um, I guess it's important to note, obviously, that DCG brought them to the table in some way, shape, or form. DCG escrowed the money for them, as far as I'm
Right.
aware. And DCG reported on their behalf to the network, as in DCG was responsible, or at least took on the responsibility, whether it was forced or not. They took on the responsibility to report the status of Alt 36 and serve that role over a period of time. Now, when
I don't
did
agree with that statement at all. They were doing their own reporting. Whenever asked, I would answer your questions to the best of my ability about it and offered my perspective on what was going on. I tried to continue meeting with them in various capacities, um, and attempt to negotiate to get that turned back on at some point. And I never took responsibility for reporting for them. Now, at a certain point, they did disengage from the community, because they were no longer pursuing Dash as a payment option, given the constraints that their banks were placing on them. And they were
Mhm.
getting a lot of anger from the community, which is understandable. We funded them, we wanted more from them. Um, but ultimately, as a business, I think they're going to look out for their own best interests. Um, now, uh, when that happened, the question started being steered towards me, because it is true. I was the one that brought them in. I was the one that initially met with them, ideated with them, and convinced them that, hey, we should abandon this credit card business we're doing, and we should pivot to digital currency. And that's when they started pursuing the platform that they did. Um, there was a point in time when I was hopeful they might be able to turn it back on, and that's when the financial difficulties started. Um, I can't. Uh, I will say that there was a large Dash holder that was slated to fund them for their for an investment round, and on the day of the wire pulled out after Alt 36 had committed, um, or actually turned away other investors and had essentially drained their finances in anticipation of this day coming. So they'd hired developers and so on. And a large MNO ghosted them on the date that the wire transfer was supposed to occur and never responded to them again. Understandably, I think that further eroded the relationship. They thought that they were going to get an infusion from a major Dash holder, and I think they were committed at that point in time to seeing this through. I had helped facilitate that, and I still do not know to this day why the Dash holder pulled out. But it left them in a lurch, and that's when the financial spiral really started. I worked really hard on that one over the years, and not everything turns out. I am happy with like the way Dash Direct turns out. It's way more than cannabis.
Yeah.
And I think it's way more useful for our users. And I think there are more opportunities like that one that we can pursue. And Dash in particular is really well positioned for, just given the speed and low cost. And Platform's going to open up a whole new set of opportunities for us that we need to take full advantage of. And we'll have some failures there too. But if we work hard at it, I know we'll have our successes as well. So, I don't want to dwell on the Alt-36 situation. It was way harder than I ever thought it was going to be, for a variety of reasons, mostly legal and banking related. We were probably a bit naive entering into that, in terms of how hard the banks would push back on that integration. And understanding the landscape, we knew that banks would bank cannabis, and we knew that banks would bank crypto, so we thought for sure this would work. So ultimately, that was the issue that they ran into.
So as far as the transparency kind of thing, there's been contention, like the success or failure of Alt-36 is obviously something that has a lot of external factors, and that's not really the issue at hand. It's more that DCG advocated for Alt-36. DCG personnel privately advocated for private personal investment in Alt-36. Some DCG staff at least did object.
Say that again.
About some DCG staff had advocated for Dash holders to personally invest, or had presented that case to personally invest in Alt-36 to Dash holders.
Who did that? Was that?
Well, might be in like the NDA kind of area of things. It might not be best to specifically mention on public podcasts, but there has been. We can go. Go over.
It's related to what I just said. I wasn't the one who approached the large MNO holder to entice them.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not related to that. But that's. But anyway, as beyond, DCG has advocated or has stood with. It's very complicated to pinpoint the exact ways of describing it, but DCG staff at least has stood in the way of Dashwatch reaching them, or has, and obviously understanding they never agreed.
I disagree with that. I haven't stood in the way. What I have done is made clear my position that Dashwatch is and should be, and this is irrespective of Alt-36. Yeah. It should be optional. It should be a service to the network. And if a particular project does not want to utilize those services, just like DCG doesn't, we do our own reporting. I believe that reporting is sufficient. it's more than sufficient. It's more than what gets reported on most of
Mm-hmm.
the Dashwatch reports. And it's not disparaging Dashwatch reports. I'm just saying we report a lot of information out to the community on what we're
Yeah.
working on. And so I think that it should be optional. That's my position on it. Everyone is
Mm-hmm.
free to disagree with me. I like Dashwatch can disagree with me. You can disagree with me. Masternodes
Mm-hmm.
can disagree with me. It's not ultimately not up to me.
Yeah.
I'm not the
That.
decision maker. So, like, if people want um, everyone to report to an entity like Dashwatch, they can
Mm-hmm.
enforce it by only funding things that agree to that.
Yeah.
What
Absolutely
is
agreed.
not okay is showing up at somebody's office or calling multiple times a day demanding that they participate in my process that they never agreed to when they put the proposal up. That is not okay. And to be clear, we raised this issue with
Mm-hmm.
Dashwatch, and they dealt with it appropriately, and the behavior uh, discontinued. And when I say we, I
Mm-hmm.
mean multiple parties brought this up to them to say, hey, can't be showing up in the middle of their workday to chew them out for something they never agreed to. Like that's just not appropriate behavior. And it
Mm-hmm.
was one individual on the team, and they were talked to, and I understand it was dealt with. And so, um, you know, I still think that's the right position to take, and you're free to disagree with me. But like,
Okay.
that's not the same thing as interfering with them. They were clearly not going to provide the information. They were
Mm-hmm.
clearly making it clear to everyone, I'm going to do my own reporting. Here they are. They were the PDFs that they reported on a monthly basis, and they were pretty thorough. And so, you know, if we want to attract good companies
Mm-hmm.
to work with the Dash network, we can't harass them either. I'm not saying Alt 36 didn't have their faults. Clearly they did. But um, that doesn't excuse us from behaving professionally.
So Alex Lee, I believe that was Alex from Dashwatch, just popped in the live chat and he said, "Can agreed to meet." Says we spoke on the phone when I emailed him. So, but that might be too far into the weeds of just, oh, let's rehash what happened in the past, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that there's like the history of any project and the ups and downs. I'm sure could cover tomes and tomes. We're running pretty far into this time. Let me
Yeah,
wrap up
we're
with the final thing that some people were asking about, which was about public presence, right? About the especially, and this especially ties back into what you're talking about with the scrappy marketing strategies we should employ of earned media, word of mouth, social media engagement, things like that. Um,
yeah,
so a lot of people, and I it's never possible to please everyone, but there's been a lot of criticisms or calls on the CEO role of Dash Core Group to have an expanded public presence, to be more accessible and public, be more out in front of things. And so people have thrown out all kinds of different things. And so, just casually, I went through, Twitter, Discord, and forums. Um, I think you posted twice, two different times on the forum in March of last year, but that's it, which I cannot fault anyone for because I don't use the forum at all, really.
yeah.
Uh,
It hasn't been active, and I've been having a couple conversations on it. It was a really good asset for us. It's searchable.
mm-hmm,
It's external. Discord is not searchable on the internet. Everything that happens there, people can't access.
mm-hmm,
It gets lost in messages, buried. Like I go there and it's like I might read the last five messages, but like if something was written a day ago, I'm not going to scroll through 500 messages. So I think the forum is a very useful asset that we haven't really invested much time as a community in or as DCG, and I think that it should be brought back.
Hmm.
to the forefront the way that it used to be before these chat-based apps kind of took over things, and because it just lives there for longer, and it's more, yeah, I mean, it's more external, but beyond that, on our other social media channels, those should be more active. We're so
Yes.
insular as a community. Every hour you're spending on Discord or whatever, that's an hour you're not spending, on Twitter or on Reddit, or having discussions in places where people can actually discover us.
Hmm.
And I don't think that I think there are downsides with Discord. I think it's great and good for a community to have a place to have chat, but it can't come at the expense of abandoning some of those other things. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's happened.
Well, let's. So on all those basic metrics, I just sort of scrolled through on over coffee this morning. Twitter is the one very public one, and I've always, as anyone can remember, been a not only an advocate for your use of Twitter, but I've been a fan of the results when you have engaged in it. I've said I really like his tweet threads. I like what he does. I think they're working well. Uh, so as on an average month, it's around 5 or so tweets per month, and Twitter's a very commonly used platform. And September, October, November were each 12 tweets. But of December, January, and February, there's 1, 1, and 0 tweets of those months. Obviously, February's still not kind of concluded. It's not a very imposing presence, I should say, a public presence. And I remember, way back in January, there was a quote on community engagement, both public and out facing and inward facing. And you said, I'm going to try to be better about it, time permitting.
Yeah.
And so basically, do you think that this is satisfactory at this point? And uh, I don't, in the past, there's been communication of I will be better at being a public facing CEO. And that has not, according to at least the numbers I'm looking at, hasn't happened yet at this point. Do you
Yeah.
have any future plans for something like that?
Yeah. So my situation right now is
Mm-hmm.
extremely time constrained, um, and it's not an excuse. Um, it's not an excuse. Uh, I had a conversation this last week, um, with June, who
Mm-hmm.
is a content manager for us, and with Chris about my lack of activity there. It's not an area I have invested in, and I recognize it's a problem that I need to resolve. Um, and frankly, uh, looking for a little bit of help in terms of, hey, if I if there's a trending topic that might be a good one for me to interact with, if I'm too busy to notice that it's occurring, by the time I
Mm-hmm.
notice, it's too late or whatever. Maybe you could highlight that to me,
Mm-hmm.
and or ghostwrite something for me that I can then edit into my own language or words and just send out real quick. Maybe I could give them access to my handles on various platforms, that I could give them the content and they could post it everywhere for me, so that it's not consuming a bunch of my time to be able to do it. There are ways for me to do this without carving out a huge portion of my time. And so we had that discussion this week, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to start to utilize them a little bit more. Um, and then just you know on a with usually at the end of the year, things slow
Mm-hmm.
down for Dash. Um, in particular, the back half of December and the first 2 weeks of January are usually slow.
Yeah.
I This has been one of the most compacted periods I have ever encountered, and that's a good thing. There's lots going on, and I hope a lot of it comes to fruition. But I have been extremely challenged lately to the point of, um, really asking for a lot of help from other members of the team, and in a way that I haven't before. Um, so that's my personal situation. It's part of the reason why I haven't spent much time on social media. And I do hope to resolve it through getting help from the team,
Hmm.
in ways that allow me to get back to it without really, dedicating time to, understanding, you know, current topics or whatever the case may be, to be able to do it in a more timely fashion. Because oftentimes I find myself, I'm like, oh, that, like,
Hmm.
I have something to say about that, but these are tweets from yesterday morning, or
Yeah, of
something like
course.
that. And it's like, I can't be commenting on it now. Um, or it's already kind of over by that point. And so, in order to be relevant on these platforms, you also have to be timely.
Yes.
And um, lately, I haven't been able to do that.
Well, I have a quick suggestion, a way that could possibly help on that before we run out, because we do have two super chats that ran in the last minute that we'd like to roll over really quick. But it's relatively, I would say, trivial, but it's very possible to add a under the Dash Marketing Hub a Twitter bounty. We already have a Twitter bounty, but to have a ghostwriting bounty to basically provide timely kind of response type things for someone like the DCG account or your personal account or whatever, and then to ship those off in real time to I guess a trusted DCG member who could hold the handle and actually do it themselves. And so this is
Yeah.
something that we could remedy this relatively easily and for a very, very low additional cost. So we can talk about that after if you want.
Yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons to different approaches. The con with that approach is
Mm-hmm.
that you're going beyond ghostwriting and writing on behalf of someone else. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I do have my own voice, and
Mm-hmm.
I do have authenticity, right? Like, not not manufactured authenticity, authentic authenticity when I tweet. And I'd like to retain that. Otherwise, I
Mm-hmm.
think you lose some of the stuff that I think you were commenting on that you like.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be me. It shouldn't be anybody else. So
Okay.
I appreciate that perspective. I think there's something in the middle. Um, or maybe those could nonetheless be shuttled to me in a timely fashion where I can turn them around. If we put a process in place, I'm sure this will get addressed.
Yes.
Or if my time situation improves, I can get back to some of the stuff that I do enjoy doing quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me hammer these last couple super chat things real quick, and then for anyone watching right now, as much as I like taking your money, please no more super chats right now because we're gonna not have time to kind of go through them. And Ryan's already been very generous with his time today. Uh, we did get a Cointree super chat here. It says, is or was Ryan an investor of Alt 36? Now, obviously, that's I guess private information, but whatever you choose to disclose or feel relevant to disclose.
Um, I When the other Dash investor pulled out,
Mm-hmm.
I provided a grant to them in hopes that they might turn it around. Um, that grant was specifically made for some Dash related development
Yeah.
that they were hoping to be able to launch. That was out of my own pocket. That was not out of DCG's pocket or the network's pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I made I made that grant. Um, I further provided a bridge loan. It was a short-term loan for the purposes of making payroll when that investor pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was the extent of it.
Okay.
Uh, so I never took equity in Alt 36. and the only quote investments I ever made were to try to preserve it uh, at a time when it looked like they were about to go under. And indeed, they did survive that period. They managed to raise more funds
Mm-hmm.
um, after that investor pulled out. And they uh, survived, I think, another year or so. Um, I didn't do that because I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that was not an investment I was looking to make for many reasons, including the reason right now, which is people are going to speculate on that and say, oh, well, he had personal financial interest. To be clear, Alt 36 never, after that point, ever pursued investments from the Dash network. And so, in my own view, it would not create any type of conflict of interest. Um, and if anything, I was trying to preserve something that might bring value to the network and not for my own personal gain. That's for sure.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
uh, that's the extent to which I would like to answer that question. But like, I never took a stake in Alt 36. I did take risks
Mm-hmm.
to try to help Alt 36 in a desperate situation.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, ultimately, it was successful at the immediate goal, which was to get them to survive long enough to raise more funds. Um, but ultimately, the company did not survive. So
So let me hit
I
this.
I tried.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me hit this last one that came from Odysee. Um, Says, and it might be someone who's unfamiliar with the way the trust works and things like that, but says many corporations have a board of directors to hold executives personally accountable for their own actions and the overall performance of the company. Does DCG have a way to hold its CEO personally accountable? If not, would Ryan be open to help put a board of directors in place at DCG?
Okay, well, there is a board of directors at DCG.
Mm-hmm.
Just like any corporation, there is a board of directors. Unfortunately, our board of directors is entirely made up of internal uh, employees. So it is
Mm-hmm.
Robert, myself, Glenn, and Sam. We proactively approached the trust protectors last year seeking to change this.
Mm-hmm.
We want a mix of external and internal, just like most corporations operate. You want some
Mm-hmm.
representation of the employees at the board, you want some representation of management at the board, but you also want that external accountability. Usually it's something like a 40-60 split internal to external. The benefits of some external board members are things uh, people that are prominent in the industry, experts that can bring a different perspective. They can bring relationships. They can help address regulatory issues, whatever the case may be, whatever mix you feel you need in order to, um, you know, have an effective board. We haven't done it in the past simply because it's an expense. Um, and we proposed changing that at the current price. We're still in discussions with the trust protectors as to how much to spend, or if we spend, or if we instead put community members in at the board. In any case, the board is appointed by the trust protectors.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they can replace any of us at any time um, by a simple vote of their shares. Um, and and so ultimately they kind of they're my boss, right? Like, or they're representing you
Mm-hmm.
as a masternode operator or a dash holder. They are representing the community and can fire me at any time, um, both in my position as board, and then the board, they can install any board that they want that would fire me in my CEO role. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it's set up that way on purpose so that we do have a board. It's set up the board is appointed by our shareholders. Our shareholders are represented by the trust protectors. And so, and they, of course, are elected by the network itself. So it's a little bit roundabout, but we have to do it that way for legal reasons, right? Like you can't
Mm-hmm.
have a trust that's voting shares without representation, right? And they could appoint themselves, as an example, if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But we're advocating for a mix of internal board members and external board members that are professionals and bring things from other industries or other areas of the industry, and can help shape our strategy and help us with gaining access to, you know, other participants in the crypto space. So yeah, they're ultimately the ones who assign who the board is, and we're working with them. We have an open project with them to try to figure out what that board composition should look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to answer the question, there is a board,
Yeah.
and the board is appointed by the trustees, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
so this structure is already in place, and we're trying to shape it in a way that will uh, bring some of that external accountability that's been lacking.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, thanks so much for the time and fielding some tough discussions and questions. It's obviously not something that everyone would ideally want to, you know, kind of deal with in public and stuff. But so here we are, and we come to the end of this, and so has the capacity for my bladder. I'm no Joe Rogan yet, who can spend 3.5 hours holding.
I've been
So
avoiding my water here because I knew that
yes,
this was going to be a long one.
yes. Well, thank you for that. Thank you everyone for watching. Thanks for the super chats. I got to run off now, but the usual digital cash rundown will come up in a few minutes. Thanks so much for being
Thanks
on,
for the
Ryan.
tough questions, Joel. I
Mm-hmm.
picked you for a reason. It's because I
Mm-hmm.
knew that you would hold my feet to the fire on a lot of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and no other podcast would do in this situation. So I appreciate having me on and giving me the opportunity to share, my perspectives on things. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for being on. All right, everyone. I'll maybe see you in a few minutes, maybe next week. Bye bye, everyone.